I don't care how Jason's powers were functioning still. It's well worth the continuity error for this anniversary. Hi everyone and welcome to another Ranger Rant episode. Of course, everyone knows I'm Archer9234. Today I'll be discussing the 10th anniversary special for Power Rangers Wild Force entitled Forever Red. Now this episode everyone knows because it's such a popular episode. Not only does it celebrate 10 years of Power Rangers in America, although technically it's really 9.5 or so because Wild Force aired back in 2002 and not 2003. It also celebrates, unfortunately, the last few weeks and months of the MMPR production crew. Because unfortunately, when the production was moved over to New Zealand for the Roadshow group, almost everyone in the MMPR production was fired, unfortunately. So this was basically the production team's last hurrah. Now the episode begins on the moon, where we notice that we see Serpentera. Now, at the end of MMPR Season 3, everyone remembers that Lord Zed had unfortunately got duped out of the power source for Serpentera, and it was simply shut down, and we find out that it was stored away, and the moon buried, because I assume Zed didn't want it to fall into the Rangers' hands, and didn't want to fall into any other enemy hands, so he buried it. Fortunately enough, Andros has been keeping tabs in space and has been following any bad things going on in space. Luckily enough, he was still keeping tabs on the Machine Empire and was watching them dig out Serpentera. Now, the 10th anniversary episode of Forever Red does not actually use any adaptation from Super Sentai at all, although it does line up with the 25th anniversary that Super Sentai was celebrating at the time. MMPR was the 16th season from Super Sentai that we adapted from, so no matter what, we'll always the season that celebrates an anniversary in Super Sentai will always fall on the same season that an anniversary would happen for PR. Now, let's talk about the villains for Forever Red. In order to cut costs and save on money in certain areas, because Forever Red was probably the most expensive episode for Wild Force, they decided to reuse the Big Bad Beetleborg costumes. Nearly all the main generals are reused from Beetleborgs and Beetleborg Metallics. Also, for the people who don't actually know that, a few other PR guests actually did voice some of the generals. Catherine Sutherland came back and voiced one of the main generals, and Walter Jones also came back and voiced one of the main generals. So Andros finds out that Serpentera is being dug up, and he has to alert the other Earth and the other Rangers from there, and has to do something for this, because if Serpentera is reactivated, he can pretty much destroy the planet. Unfortunately enough, Andros knocked over a bunch of rocks and simply alerted the Machine Empire to his presence, so they went after him. This was a weird, though, at this moment, is that they were using horses. Why would enemies of the Machine Empire use horses? I would have thought they would have used the special futuristic vehicles with the tentacle octopus things that were featured in Zeo mostly, because they're part of the Machine Empire, but they're using Earth horses. I thought that was really bizarre. And most use some sort of land vehicle with wheels. It's just like really out there that they go and use horses. So after Andros escapes, we go back to Earth and seeing what was going on. And two old guests appear, Bulk and Skull. We finally do get to see them again. As usual, they're acting like their funny, goofy selves, and they're reminiscing of past episodes, mainly from Zeo, and some episodes from Season 3. And they get a phone call. Bulk is kind of scared, and I assume that's Andros on the phone. And he gives it to another past Ranger, Tommy. I assume he's taking a vacation break because, again, he's retired from being a Power Ranger and he's just simply relaxing. Now, in this scene, Rocky was supposed to be here as well. But originally what was going to happen is that Rocky was going to be Tommy's butler. And Steve Cardenas was originally contacted. However, Steve Cardenas had moved and they were unable to find out where he was because they lost his number and they didn't know where he was. Unfortunately, Rocky was cut from the episode. Now, I'm glad he was not actually in this episode because, really, Rocky doesn't deserve to be someone's butler. He was a Red Ranger, just as Jason is the Red Ranger. Even though he wasn't really used as often in MMPR, because again, at that point, Tommy was the 6th Ranger, but he was considered leader at that point. Rocky shouldn't be a doormat for Tommy and for anyone else. He was considered a Red Ranger. Logically, he should be using the same Red Ranger suit that Jason was using, although it would be kind of confusing. But they could have gone 2 other ways. One way was not practical. Rocky could have been using the MMPR movie version suit for himself, but since Fox owns the design, they couldn't actually use it. Again, since it was designed under Fox Films, Saban can't use it, and that's the reason why you never see or things referenced from the movies or in the actual episodes. Another way they could have gone with it, but most fans probably would have hated it, is that he uses his ninja powers only, but it would have been really bizarre that we only see him in his pajamas instead of actually being in a Ranger suit. So overall, even though I would have loved Rocky to be in the episode, I'd rather have not him been a butler. After Tommy talks to Andros, they start gathering up other past Rangers. Carter actually goes and finds Cole Evans, and while they're in a park, I assume they're training as usual. I was kind of surprised that they still had the Lightspeed Rescue 1 truck, because it was been like 2 years. I would have thought either it would have been converted into another vehicle, for example, for Time Force, because they reuse vehicles many times, or it would have just been dismantled and thrown out. When Carter requests Cole's presence for the team up, it felt kind of weird though, because he's asking for Cole only, and the world is at stake, but the other 4 and 5 Rangers are not asked at all. They're just there, and then they don't even care that they weren't even picked up or anything. It just felt a little bit weird. I also like to point out that on the close-up of the rescue morpher, you can see that Carter's morpher, the tape that's on the 4 buttons is actually peeling off. After Carter drives Cole to the new Nasada base, Cole meets up again with the Time Force Rangers, and of course he knows Wes and Eric from the previous team up that happened not too long ago. It was really weird though that Carter reintroduces them. I know it's for the audience because they might not know them, because again, old fans may forget, or young fans may not know they existed. So he's reintroduced, but it just feels really awkward when Cole actually does know them and he does references them, and then he's reintroducing everyone anyway. After that introduction, we get the introduction of TJ. Again, TJ is the Red Turbo Ranger who replaced Tommy, of course, and we see him inside a new vehicle. That's kind of, I guess it's supposed to be a little bit of a reference to Lightning Cruiser. And we also get a big moment where we finally get to hear TJ's full name. Up to this point, we never actually heard TJ's full name. We only called him as TJ. This time, we finally did get to hear TJ's name, Theodore J. Jarvis Johnson. After that introduction, Andros finally introduces himself to the other Rangers and introduces, of course, the most important and famous Ranger of all, Tommy. After a little bit of an explanation and backstory of what's been going on, we find out that Andros has rebuilt the megaship because, again, thanks to the Lost Galaxy Rangers, it was destroyed saving Terra Venture, so he had to rebuild it. I thought it was a cool nod because it's keeping in continuity and referencing past episodes, and they needed a space vehicle. They didn't have any space vehicles at this point. So after Andros introduces the Megaship Mark II, all the other Rangers are ready and are almost ready to board the ship, when Andros recalls that there's one other Red Ranger on the planet still remaining. Tommy was thinking that, he's going to miss it. He probably doesn't want to come back and blah, blah, blah. Luckily enough, he did. And we get this great introduction with Jason. It was a real fun moment because at this point, we haven't seen him since the Turbo movies. Although I kind of don't feel like that the bike motif for Jason kind of fit with him, his character. I mean, it was awesome how he came in, all dramatic and stuff. But it just didn't really fit right using a bike. After all the remaining introductions, they enter the megaship and, of course, set a course to the moon, while they're finally giving the main discussion of what's going to happen. If Serpentera is activated, the Earth can be easily destroyed, because remember, back in Season 3, Serpentera destroyed Edenoid for the Mask Rider team-up special. So it could easily wipe out Earth without any much of a problem, especially after the Machine Empire figured out the power source issues that Lord Zed had. Another cool moment, though, inside the megaship is where we actually hear one little scene with Alpha's voice. Although it's the original Alpha 5's voice, they're using the Alpha 6 body, but in the end credits, he's listed as Alpha 7. It was a weird continuity mistake, because obviously Alpha 6 comes back in the 15th anniversary where it gives a weird issue of like who's what and where. They should have just simply used the original Alpha 5 suit and stuck with that, because there's no problem reusing Alpha 5, because he just simply went with Zord on to another home. After a little bit, the Rangers finally arrive on the moon and attempt to stop the Machine Empire. They have to fight all the old minions from the Machine Empire, and we get this great choreography fight with all the Red Rangers. The majority of them are all doing most of their stunts. We're getting all these great moments. Now, a couple of people that I noticed that always complain about how Carter fights. Carter is the one who always uses a blaster over traditional fighting. Same goes for Andros. That's their particular style. It doesn't mean that they're weak or anything. It's just that's how they fight. They prefer to use a blaster and get it over with rather than, go through 50 million flips to get someone knocked out. After a little bit, we fly back to Miranoi, and we see Leo unlock the Red Quasar Saber and head straight to Earth on the Galaxy Glider. Along the way, also pick up Oriko, because again, Oriko is another Red Ranger from the Alien Ranger season. Now, let's talk about the issues with Danny Slavin. Now, everyone knows that Danny Slavin, after the main season of Lost Galaxy, Danny Slavin had problems with the Lightspeed Rescue and the Lost Galaxy team-up. While he was in the episode, Danny Slavin originally signed up for the Lost Galaxy season because he wanted to pay for law school. So after the season was completed, he most likely graduated law school, and he's dealing with his family and his other businesses. So he was really unable to really do much. That's the reason why in the Lost Galaxy Lightspeed Rescue team up, we did see Danny Slavin, and he was acting in the episode, but he couldn't do his ADR, his voice recording audio, to redub over it, so that's why we got that replacement. And the same thing happened here in Forever Red. He couldn't always be on set because he only had a certain amount of time to film. That's the reason why we have these continuity issues where Leo powers down, but then there's one shot where he's still in the Galaxy suit. Unfortunately, though, we didn't get the original actor who played Larko, the Red Alien Ranger. It was cool that they still acknowledged the Alien Ranger season because, frankly, they could have simply cut it out and they could have just replaced him with something else or just ignore him entirely. But he's still a part of the PR lore. Although I'd also like to point out there was a weird continuity issue with his helmet. If you look really closely when he's riding the Galaxy Glider with Leo, his helmet visor actually has holes to see through instead of a standard visor where you would normally see through. It was like they were reusing a cosplay costume. It just looked really weird. But any other point inside the episode, Larko is actually using the normal traditional real costume that they used. So finally, after all the 9 Red Rangers and our 6th hero guest, Eric, they finally line up and do their group morph. Let's talk about TJ and Jason's powers. Now, everyone knows at the end of Season 2, the Power Morpher was damaged and destroyed, and also for the fact that Jason gave up his Power Morpher to Rocky. Now, there are many different fan explanations of why this is going on and how can he use his powers and how could he not use his powers. There's no realistic explanation of how to really explain it, but I prefer this fan explanation because it works with all what was seen in the episodes and what was going on. I prefer that when the sword transferred the powers from Jason to Rocky, it duplicated the Power Morpher and the Tyrannosaurus Dino Coin to Jason. So even though Rocky had the Season 2 Power Morpher himself, and that was separated and destroyed, Jason still had his Power Morpher, and it was perfectly fine and functioning, and never actually damaged from what happened with Lord Zed. Now, the easiest way to explain TJ's powers, even though at the end of Turbo they all lost their powers because the command center was destroyed, is that, remember, Lightning Cruiser is still alive and out there, and his powers are still simply functioning off him. Because remember, back in Space Team Up with Justin, his Turbo Morpher was being powered by his former vehicle too. So that's pretty much the easiest way to explain those two guys losing their powers. All the other Rangers had all their powers from all along, so they were perfectly fine. The Zeo powers were never actually destroyed. They simply switched over from the Zeo powers to the Turbo powers. So the Zeo powers were always working. So while we get this great moment where everyone's morphing and they do reuse the old morphs rather than, remaking them to more modern standards like they did in the 15th anniversary. The weird moment though is when Leo says go galactic, he says go galactic again after he morphs, while all the other Rangers are saying, traditionally they're Red Rangers and their motto. It's like, I don't understand why Leo said go galactic twice. It just felt really awkward. So after the morphing sequence, we go into this big, great fight where each Ranger is split up into groups. We had all these great fights between the breakup teams of the Red Rangers, between each of the Machine Empire Masters. Now, when we get to Carter and Andros' fight, they're doing all the cool Matrix moments, and they're mainly fighting with lasers. I like to point out that Andros and Carter are actually using the BOA toys instead of actually the props. Because if you look closely, you can see Andros' Astro Blaster. You can see the power switch and the speaker hole. So, and of course, Carter's, you could tell that Carter's is a toy because it's a little bit too small. Now, everyone else has their original weapons, including Jason's Blade Blaster. It's the original size weapon and prop that was used with the original suit. Speaking of the suits, none of the suits are actually altered. They're reusing the original suits from what they were using in their previous seasons. None of them are altered like the 15th anniversary, how they slightly changed the Black Ranger costume. Jason's costume has the original helmet clasp, has the original belt buckle, the way it's supposed to be. So after they defeat most of the main Machine Empire bosses, one of them gets away and re-enters Serpentera, and actually, unfortunately, it's starting to power up. This is where everyone starts to hate the episode, is the anticlimactic way they finish Serpentera off. Everyone would have loved to have a Megazord fight with Serpentera. It would have been extremely expensive for the episode, while the episode was already expensive as it is. So instead, they used the Wild Force Rider that they previously introduced in the previous episode to finish off Serpentera. Now, of course, everyone's going to complain, well, how could a bike finish off Serpentera while Megazords couldn't do it and he could destroy the world? They had to kind of fudge it, but also the reason why they used the Wild Force Rider is because the only reason why this episode got made is because they had to sell the Wild Force Rider toy. So in order to make up for the cost of the episode, they have to specifically promote this bike to sell as toys. Now, another issue with the Serpentera and Wild Force Rider bike finale is that the scaling for Serpentera and the bike were way off. Serpentera is like 2 or 3 times bigger than a Megazord. Now, a bike would be a spec to Serpentera, but you wouldn't have been able to see Cole, so that's the reason why they fudged it. So technically, Cole was the size of a Megazord himself in order to fight Serpentera when he blew him up. So after they blow up Serpentera, they save the day as always, and we finally meet up with everyone back on Earth, including Leo back on Earth, and they're discussing all their fun moments and how everyone's like, oh, Tommy's a great Ranger, and everyone's like, no, he's not, please. It was a fun little moment, although I did hate it though that Larko again was not there. At least Leo was there and he had enough time to actually film that way. A lot of the moments that are at the end of the episode were actually ad-libbed. I remember Eric, that he said that that was an ad-lib, that I would eat the Dragonzord for lunch. Jason reminisces about how Tommy and Kimberly were like kissing at the juice bar, although they technically never actually kissed at the juice bar. They actually kissed near a lake in a park. And of course TJ has to bring up that stupid Turbo episode where he got baked inside a pizza. Overall, I have to give the episode 4 out of 5. It does have some flaws, mainly the Serpentera finale, the Alpha 5 goop up, and the lack of Rocky. It was awesome to hear Alpha, and it was awesome to see Bulk and Skull back on Earth, although it's like, I assume this is when Bulk returned to Earth, and that's how he's with Samurai. What do you guys personally think? Do you think this is the best episode of PR has ever done since And then, do you think this anniversary episode is much better than the 15th anniversary episode that happened in Operation Overdrive? Again, everyone, leave your comments below. Leave your suggestions below as well of what future episodes would you like me to review. Thanks again for watching Ranger Rants. I'll see you guys here right back here next week.